try to somehow make a case for my own fields in this area, but I do believe that very profoundly about migration, that you can't understand contemporary migration without understanding the legal framework, and indeed the gaps in the legal framework that relate to it. And I think what we've seen this spring and summer, especially this summer, not maybe in a sense the crisis, there was a first crisis in relation to the Mediterranean and rescuing migrants there, and that was kind of solved. I will talk a little bit about that. But then the bigger crisis through the summer of people traveling through the Balkan route, that has kind of just sort of blown away the fragile framework of control and law that existed, but people just basically marched right through it. Okay, they came up against new barriers, and that maybe it's true that a catastrophic equilibrium has resulted, but it's not the same equilibrium, slightly catastrophic one that we had before. It's a different one, and it shows to me the fragility, the flexibility of legal frameworks, or at least it's opened up a space where legal frameworks need to be rethought, and not just by academics or other students of the thing, but actually by real world policymakers. And that's what's fascinating right now, is to see those the scope for redesign, rearranging of the framework. But I wanted just to list some of the legal issues that have been very directly posed by the events, particularly the summer, maybe a little bit about the spring, as it were, as well. So one of the issues is the lack of provision for humanitarian visas in the world. In other words, the lack of the possibility for Syrians to get directly by plane from anywhere, Jordan, Lebanon, or indeed people passing through to get on a ferry. So to have a visa that permits that form of legal travel. The simple fact is that the world of international protection depends on people arriving, and it's astonishing if you stand back and think, well, this is clearly no way to run protection, to say that people must travel by irregular means first, but that is the core of current arrangements, with small exceptions around resettlement, and that has been clearly posed as a serious gap, not just in the abstract, but concretely this year. The question of access to territories in what are called mass influx situations, at least that's what lawyers call them. That again, I think it was when Hungary closed the border, whenever that was, late August or early September, and everyone was running around working out what to say about it. It was very difficult for people to say it was illegal in international law, because probably it isn't, or at least it's an open question. Okay, you could make a case that it is, but you can even make that it's illegal, but you can even make the case that states are entitled to take those steps in emergency, as they see it, situations. So it is astonishing that an EU member state, part of the Schengen zone, can actually, it seems, in international law, deny access to its territory by simply saying, we're not engaging with you, we're not going to entertain anything you're saying to us. Again, that's a question which ought to be now more examined than in the past. And then there's a related issue about Hungary, which is about the question of transit. If someone's a refugee, Kelly's obviously right about the theory there that someone is a refugee in the eyes of international law before that gets recognised. But if basically what they're saying is, I'm going to pass through your state territory, and I'm not going to make an application to you. I want to make an application to your neighbour or the neighbour of your neighbour, and then the state says, okay, well then you're an irregular migrant, and we're going to detain you and we're going to expel you. There's no clarity about the legal answer in that situation, because there is no cast iron right to transit through country X in order to make a protection claim in country Y. And some of the dilemmas around Hungary's conduct have been about that Hungary, okay, de facto you would expect a country to say, fine, go, pass through, we'll help you. But Hungary decided to take a tougher line because it didn't like so many people passing through, and there was no clear legal answer. It might be a clear moral answer, but there's no clear legal answer to that. So really, I would say something that needs to be articulated is a right to transit for refugees, a right to pass through intermediate countries. In other words, so we're starting to get towards the question of choice by spontaneous refugees. Then there are questions around migrant smuggling, the legal framework to do with that. And there is international law, as many of you may know, or some of you will know, that there is international law relating to smuggling. There's a migrant smuggling treaty, which, despite some of its language, basically is designed to just deter migrant smuggling as such. And it's ultimately, what it problematizes, the current international law on smuggling, it problematizes the act of smuggling. And what it doesn't problematize is putting people in danger. If you see the difference that I'm drawing, it takes a state-centric approach. It says the problem is that for states, their laws are being broken. The problem is not that for migrants, their lives are being put at risk. And it seems to me that the basis of the international law related to smuggling needs to be re-examined in order to say that, okay, states have legitimate interests, but clearly the greater issue is harm. It's harm to people. And smugglers putting them in situations of danger. And that is not at all the way international law conceives of the issue right now. Turning to the EU framework, the shorthand this summer has been Dublin versus Schengen, if people understand what I mean. So the EU has an essentially absurd system for allocating asylum applications, known as the Dublin regulation. It's absurd because it puts all of the burden, if it were applied fully, which of course it isn't, but if it were, to the extent that it's applied, it puts the burden back on the country of initial arrival. And we know that that's the worst place, that's a completely absurd thing to do, but that is the system, and of course the border countries, including Hungary, but also Greece and Italy and Malta, have been objecting to this and attempting to frustrate the system as best they can. And I suppose it's been a good thing that the flaws of the Dublin regulation have led it to being suspended in certain parts. And its credibility, more importantly, has, I think, been completely destroyed by the events of December. We don't yet have a permanent system to replace it, and that is something that's actively, I think, up for discussion right now. As for Schengen, well, I would say, when I say Dublin versus Schengen, what I mean is I think that it's difficult to see the Schengen zone surviving in its current form unless they revisit the Dublin rules for reallocating asylum seekers. There has to be some more credible and stable system than Dublin. But let's say they do that. Schengen is obviously under pressure from the refugee crisis, from the events in Paris. I think that, personally, I think that it'll survive. I think that it's hugely important in economic terms and in political terms to the EU to have Schengen open borders up. It was always it is a remarkable thing, actually, to have open borders between what are still Soviet states. But I think its significance will mean that it survives, but it will probably be modified. I feel that that's where we will end up, that there will be some modification of the scope for some greater power for states to suspend or to qualify the rights to movement that exist. I don't think it's been all bad. Okay, I've mentioned, and certainly looking at it in the round, I mentioned the loss of credibility of the Dublin system. I think that's probably a good thing. The system for allocating asylum applications, we'll see what comes out. Of course, we've had as well greater acceptance of relocation and of resettlement from outside the EU for refugees. Of course, there's been some very difficult bargaining around that, but before we had nothing, and now we have some acceptance of ideas of relocation and resettlement at the EU level, and that is a step forward, even if it's only a small step, and it permits other things to be done later on. I think, going back to the spring events, I think there is cause for optimism, because in a sense the EU member states have accepted a duty to rescue people in the Mediterranean through Frontex or through state initiatives, and that was absent at the EU level until this summer. Of course, Italy had done it before through Mare Nostrum, we know the details. but in a sense it's become Europeanized. I think that's very good. In the background, incidentally, is a European Court of Human Rights ruling in a case called Kersey, which insists that migrants at sea who are intercepted or rescued become the responsibility of the state doing the rescuing. So it's particularly against that background it's striking that rescuing has been, it seems, accepted as a duty. So I mean, there are probably other more positive signs. I recognise that on the ground this is a catastrophic equilibrium, but it is provoking reflection at the policy and legal level, and at least some of those changes may well be positive ones.
Great, thank you very much.